Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, and it's Monday morning, so that means it's time for this week's GT Sport Daily Race C Strategy Guide. And you can see from the screen there, we are at Dragon Trail Gardens 2 and we are in Group 4 Machinery. So here's a closer look at the settings for this one in terms of tyre wear and fuel wear. As I said, Dragon Trail Gardens 2, which is the reverse iteration. 12 laps to get round. We have fuel consumption at ×3, tyre wear at ×7, and we only have the racing hard tyre available. So yet another week without a mandatory tyre. I think that must be 3-4 weeks, maybe even 5 weeks now since we last had that. Moving on, we'll just take a brief but closer look at the circuit we're going to be visiting. As I said, Dragon Trail Gardens in reverse, which is within the sort of Croatian coastline. 2.7 miles long, 14 corners to negotiate. In terms of circuit type, it's a sort of technical and handling circuit with no exceptionally long straights. And sort of in terms of featured corners, it's got this famous quadruple left midway through the lap, and on screen what you can see is the sort of downhill chicane, which can very much make or break your lap. And we'll take a sort of closer look as to why the first part of that chicane in particular is so important to get right. Now, of course, we're in Group 4 Machinery, and the car that is dominating Group 4 at the moment is the Audi TT, or in particular when it comes to sort of outright lap pace, it's the FF cars. But in particular, the Audi TT has come to the fore. If you did this week's Nations race, then you'll be kind of very familiar with that. It was really the only option to go for. So we will take a look to see how the Audi TT is going to perform at this combination. So let's jump on board our Audi TT at the very beginning of this run. Now this run is going to be a no stopper, just to see how the car manages to handle that. We are on the hard tyres, of course. There's no mandatory tyre, and tyre wear is only at ×7. Now we do have 12 laps to get round, and there is quite a lot of corners on this circuit, so I could see tyre wear being a little bit of an issue for this car. Obviously the FFs, if you don't know what FF means, it means it's a front engine car and a front wheel drive car. So that technically means that the front tyres on this car are pretty much doing everything. They've got to drive the car forward, they've got to obviously do the turning, and because the engine's over the front of the car, all the weight is there as well. So that sort of exacerbates the sort of tyre wear on the FF cars. So while the Audi TT is always going to be a very quick car when its tyres are in good shape, because of that tyre wear sort of developing as the race progresses, it may not be the best car for the race, but that is certainly something we'll take a little bit of a look at as this video progresses. Now before we kind of get on or carry on with this strategy, let's just get fuel consumption out of the way. We've got the fuel up on the screen there. You can see we've got 20 laps in the tank remaining. It's only a 12 lap race. The Audi TT is very good on fuel. Most cars will probably maybe sort of be good for around about 16 or 17 laps, but that's just going to mean that no car in the category is going to have any issues on the fuel. So that is certainly one element of strategy we don't need to really worry about in this one. We're coming towards the end of lap 1 on this no stop run. We are about to cross the finish line here, and there's no two doubts about it, the Audi TT is very quick out the box, or very quick when the tyres are in good shape. I have tested a number of cars around this track, but we're going to sort of transport forward here to lap number 7, and the reason we've sort of transported to lap number 7 is this is the first lap where I really did feel the tyre wear was starting to become a little bit of an issue with the car. So coming into the last corner here, it's a long radius right hand corner, and we're going to get caught out with a little bit of understeer as those front tyres are no longer given the kind of maximum amount of grip. So that was the sort of first danger sign that the tyres on the Audi TT were beginning to feel a little bit second hand. Just towards the end of lap 7 there. So we've still got 5 laps to get through, so definitely looks like tyre wear could be an issue for this car. So forwarding to lap number 12, right at the end of the race, coming through the last chicane, you can see the lap times have continued to tumble from that point onwards. Obviously in the sort of mid 39s initially. Lap 7 we moved into the 40s, and that's pretty much where we stayed, and we're actually starting to threaten the 141s as we come onto lap 12. So we'll just take a close look at the tyre wear here, as we should zoom in. There we go. So around about 25% wear on the front left, and around about 20% on the front right. Now I always kind of think with the hard tyres around, they sort of really start to give up good grip around about 20% wear. So the Audi TT is getting into that area where the sort of tyres are starting to really give you some issues. But here is the finishing time for that no stop run in the Audi. It's a 20 minutes 05.9. So a slightly longer daily race see this week than what we've had in sort of the last 2 or 3. They were sort of more like coming in about 18 minutes. We've got a 20-minute race here, which is nice to see. So there is no doubt that the sort of tyre wear was becoming a bit of an issue in the second half of that race in the Audi TT, and the lap times were beginning to sort of reflect that. So would the one stop be an option in the Audi? Now, the Audi TT is a difficult car to drive. It kind of drives different to pretty much any other car in the sort of racing categories, or the FF cars do anyway, and the level of tyre wear that people are going to get is going to vary. I don't think the no stop is going to be possible for some players out there. So if your tyre wear is really bad, can you actually one stop this car? So this gives us a chance to take a look at the pit loss here. So we're stationary for 4.7 seconds. The pit time comes in at 13.2, and when it's all said and done, we'll lose 7 seconds on the racetrack, which is not that much, to be perfectly honest with you, in a 12-lap race. So obviously you'd pit around about lap 6. So how much of an impact can we make with the fresh tyres? Now, a bit of a strange thing happened here, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I wasn't really able to go any quicker than the first stint with the fresh tyres, despite the fact that the car was around about 25 kilograms a litre on the fuel, and it did somewhat confuse me, I have to say. Now, the only thing I can maybe put it down to is that I maybe sort of drove the sort of tyres a little bit hard on the out lap in my sort of first flying lap, and therefore, or particularly on the out lap, and then just lost the sort of absolute maximum grip on the tyres. Now, the optimal was saying we should be able to do a 38.5, and our fastest lap was a 39.4. Now, the tyres have kind of kept in reasonable shape over this second stint. In fact, I set the fastest lap there on our 5th lap on the new tyres. So in terms of keeping their sort of pace, it's consistent, not too bad at all, but I was a little bit of a loss as to why we weren't sort of going any quicker than the laps in the first stint. In saying that though, we are a good bit quicker than the sort of comparative lap on the non-stop, at least a second, over a second sometimes. So as we come towards the end of this one stop run, it will be fairly close between the two runs as to which one is quicker. I do feel though that in laps 8 and 9 we should have been in the 38s. However, coming out the last corner, let's see if we've managed to do enough on this second stint with the fresh tyres to overcome that 7-second deficit of the pit stop. Coming up to the line, and we're going to do a 39.4 to finish, so good consistency in the second stint at the very least, if not quite the pace that I was expecting. But the finishing time comes in at 20 minutes 07.0. So we're actually 1.1 seconds slower than the no stop. Okay, so you might be asking, is there an alternative to the Audi TT for this race? And the good news is that there is, and it's this car here on the screen, the Mclaren 650S Group 4 machinery. So we're going to join on board with the Mclaren here on lap number 10. We're halfway through lap number 10, and this gives us an idea to sort of take a look at the lap times and see how they're sort of stacking up against the Audi TT's sort of lap times on laps 7, 8 and 9. The Audi TT no stop strategy, of course. So the Audi TT by lap 7 had fallen into the 1 minute 40s, lap 8 was a 140.1, and I think lap 9 was a 140.4. And you can see here the McLaren, whilst just about able to keep pace with the Audi TT over the first 6 laps, is now lapping quicker than the Audi TT on the same strategy. So the McLaren looks like it could well be an option. Now, one thing I will point out with the McLaren though is it's a much trickier car to drive than the Audi TT and to sort of get the pace out of. I did actually have to do quite a lot more laps in the sort of McLaren to get comfortable doing this pace than I did the Audi TT, which just seemed very, very quick out the box. But if you can get the McLaren working, the fact it's an MR car and you can kind of balance the tyre wear through the brake balance, I think I'm running the brake balance at +2 on this car, means that in the second half of the race you're actually a good bit quicker than the Audi. Obviously the Audi just wears out its front tyres, means you get more understeer, and it's much harder to keep a consistent pace, and it's much easier to kind of fall into, so if you make a mistake, for that mistake to be a lot worse with. whereas with the McLaren being an MR car, you can keep that tyre wear nice and balanced, and therefore you can kind of the car stays fairly consistent throughout the entire run. So here we are coming to the end of the McLaren's run, lap number 12. Obviously tyre wear is having an impact on the lap times here, but we're still a good bit quicker than the Audi over the last 3-4 laps. And as we come across the finishing line, it's going to show up in the finishing time. So the finishing time pops up there and it's 20 minutes 04.2. The Audi coming in at 20 minutes 05.9, so 1.7 seconds faster for the McLaren. Now, I did have aspirations to do a one-stop run in the McLaren, and also a one-stop run and a no-stop run in the Jaguar, which is what we're in just now, but unfortunately I only managed to get the Jaguar one-stop run done. But it should be enough to give us a sort of comparison between the kind of cars that are sort of similar tyre wear and lap time, if you like, between the no-stop and the one-stop. So the Jaguar, in terms of lap time, is capable of doing very similar to the McLaren. And in terms of tyre wear, it didn't seem to be too much different either, despite the fact they're sort of completely different drivetrains and sort of concept of car, if you like. So this is the Jaguar one-stop run that we're on with here. We're actually just going to take a look at lap 12. There's no point kind of going through the rest of it. We've already seen the pit loss, and we kind of suffered a very similar thing here as we did with the Audi, in that we weren't really able to kind of be much quicker in the second stint, despite the fact we were lower on fuel than we were on the first stint. Again, just seemed very strange. I'm not entirely sure why it was. Maybe I'm trying to overdrive the car, thinking the car should be quicker with the sort of lower fuel load. But I'm beginning to wonder if it's maybe something that's came in with the update, that you don't get as big a benefit from the fresh tyres, or maybe fuel doesn't have as big an impact on the car as it used to. Maybe it's something to look at in the future. But the Jaguar coming to the end of its one-stop run here, out the last corner, and we've got a sort of idea as to how it stands up and what its finishing time is going to be. Now, it is going to add a second onto the finishing time here because we picked up a penalty very early in the run. So finishing time should hopefully just pop up here, and it's a 20 minutes 10.4. So it would be a 20 minutes 9.4, which is significantly slower than any other run that we did. So the Jaguar obviously didn't quite have the same pace as the other two cars, and just wasn't able to make that many inroads when it came to the sort of fresh tyres. But we will take a look at the strategies a little bit sort of later on in the video, talk through everything we've kind of gone through there and how I think this one is going to unfold. However, quick tip about this racetrack before we get there, and when it comes to the chicane towards the end of the lap, do not touch this curb on the inside of the first part, or that's going to happen to you. Well, it might not be quite as dramatic as that every time, but it's certainly going to upset the car every single time you hit it. I learned that very quickly and then just avoided it. You can cut the second part of the chicane quite a lot, but you certainly don't want to be touching that sausage on the first part. That is my hot tip for this track. So how is this race likely to unfold? Well, to be honest, it's going to be quite an interesting one, I think. Now, I think the car that will dominate the time trial leaderboards will be the Audi TT. However, in race trim, because of the sort of tyre wear, in terms of strategy, the one-stop and the no-stop are coming in very, very similar. If you're able to look after the tyres, you should be able to do the no-stop on it. If you just find yourself trashing the tyres, then you can do the one-stop and it's not going to be much slower. So it's really going to depend on your driving style and how good you are with the Audi, depending on what strategy you want to go in that car. However, as we've seen from the McLaren, the fact that it can sort of look after its tyres a lot better, it can just about match the Audi in the opening stages in terms of pace, but it's much quicker in the second half. It means that over the course of the race time, the McLaren was actually the quicker car. So for something like the McLaren, it's not the same story as the Audi. The Audi is very similar between the one-stop and the no-stop, but I think for the McLaren and pretty much any other kind of handling car, a car that can look after its tyres, it's going to be a no-stop all day long. As we can see from the Jaguar actually finished 5 seconds slower than McLaren, trying to do the one-stop run. So a fairly interesting race in store, I do believe. No real clear-cut, absolutely 100% guaranteed way to go about this race. I think there is, as you've hopefully managed to demonstrate, several different ways to go about it, depending on what car you choose and how good you are in tyre wear, and kind of what sort of driving style and sort of car style you like. Obviously the Audi TT is definitely not for everyone because of the way it understeers, so there is other options out there in terms of something like the Mclaren. So hopefully it's been a useful and helpful guide up to this point. However, as always, we're going to finish with a lap guide. Now, the quickest lap I did actually do in all the testing was in the Mclaren, but I do think most people are going to go for the Audi anyway, so here is a quick lap guide in the Audi. Got the brake balance at +5 to sort of look after those front tyres as much as possible. Approaching turn 1, and we're going to brake just before the 100-metre board. Going to sort of move it down into second gear briefly just to try and get some rotation, but then up into third gear on the exit to try and look after those front tyres and sort of not put too much wheel spin through them. Coming down towards, I guess this would be classed as turn 3, you're looking for this Pirelli board there on the left as your braking point. Throw it in with as much speed as you can, downshifting and turning, very tricky corner. This is the quadruple corner, very easy to run wide onto the red stuff on the outside and just be sucked out into the marbles there. Braking at the canopy just above there, or the sort of barrier, I'm not entirely sure what it's called. Try to keep it as tight as you can in these corners just to give yourself the sort of best run for the next corner. These corners all kind of run into each other. Don't run wide at this curb here, you'll pick up a half-second penalty. Braking just before the 100-metre board, overslowing the car to get the rotation. You have to sort of brake a little bit more and get the car slowed down more into that hairpin than you would necessarily think, just to get on the power a little bit more early. Down the sort of back straight here, and we are approaching the dodgy chicane. And we're going to be looking out for the 100-metre board. Braking just about on it or before it. Avoid that sausage curb on the left there. Cut this curb as much as you can and getting on the power as early as possible, using all the track on the width, moving out onto this curb here on the outside for the last fast right-hander. Trying to hook up on the curb to bring the car around and then get on the power as early as you can to carry as much speed down the straight. And that is a lap of Dragon Trail Gardens in reverse in the Audi TT. And hopefully that has been of some use to you. So as I said a little bit earlier, I think it's a fairly interesting race in prospect. So I can't kind of give you a stone cast iron, if you like, strategy for this one. I think if you go into Audi, it's going to depend on your tyres, how you look after your tyres, what way you go. If you don't like the Audi, there is other options out there. Anyway, that is the end of the video. Please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button if you like what we're doing on the channel, and I shall see you on the next one. Goodbye now.